Good morning. I'm Sharon Goodson of the Jewish Community Foundation of San Diego, and along with Debbie Anderson of the Rancho Santa Fe Foundation, am very proud to be co-chairing the San Diego Grantmakers annual conference. Actually can't stop smiling, that was so exciting to see it live. It's my great honor to introduce Dr. Emmett Carson, Chief Executive Officer of the Silicon Valley Foundation. I have been a great fan of Emmett's for many years and am thrilled to welcome him to San Diego. Emmett is an internationally recognized leader in the field of philanthropy and has devoted his career to being a catalyst for positive change. As founding CEO in 2007, he led an unprecedented merger that created the Silicon Valley Foundation. With over $2 billion under management, the Community Foundation is one of the largest in the world. Emmett has authored more than 100 works on philanthropy and is viewed as an authority on social justice grant-making, public accountability for nonprofits, and African American philanthropy. We are in for a real treat. But just a couple housekeeping notes before we get started on the session format. Following Emmett's presentation, we'll have a question and answer period. Please note your questions on the index cards on your tables, and we have pens there for you also. Once you've written your question, please raise your hand, and volunteers will be circulating to collect the cards and deliver them to Nancy, who will be our session moderator for this period. Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Emmett Carson.
Thank you. Good morning. It's not too bad after all the rousing singing. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great. Thank you. It is great to be with you here today. Thank you for that phenomenal introduction, overly generous. I also want to thank Nancy for the invitation to be with you. The staff have been wonderful. And also I want to thank EPIP, the Emerging Practitioners in Philanthropy. Last night, they had a little roundtable discussion, and we were able to share their reflections and some of my reflections. So you've gotten full use out of me on this visit. And also my thanks to the Rotary 33 singers and the pianists. I am a struggling piano player, and so I always marvel when people do it effortlessly. It is good to be with you today. Very good to be with you. So I tweeted the other day that what I wanted to talk about was what we can learn as grant makers from the movie Jerry Maguire. How many of you saw Jerry Maguire? Quite a few of you. So there's a couple of hands didn't go up. So and it's not I had you at hello. I know the romantics in here, I had you at hello. I don't have you at hello, but I hope to have you at the end. In Jerry Maguire, he is a sports agent, okay? And one night he has what he calls an epiphany about his entire profession, how they go about their work, and how they have gone astray for what he believes are some of those critical principles. And he stays up all night and writes a document. You may not remember the name of that document, but the name of the document he writes is The Things That We Think But Do Not Say, the Future of Our Field. And he writes it up, he runs to the local Kinko's, he has it printed, he has it put under everybody's door at the conference hotel. And he wakes up in the middle of the morning and says, "What have I done? I've bared my soul about all of the challenges that I think are facing my profession, and can I get these copies back?" He calls the guy up, he can't get the copies back. He walks down into the lobby, and spontaneously everybody starts to clap. And as they're clapping, one guy looks over to the other, "How long do you think he's gonna last?" And the guy's, "About 2 days." As they're all clapping in admiration for what he's done. And later on, he has a player, Cuba Gooding Jr., who is his client, his single client, who throughout the movie says, "Show me the money." That's just like, show me the money, right? And at a critical part in the movie, Jerry Maguire, Tom Cruise, says to Cuba Gooding Jr., he says, look, I can get you the money. What I need you to do is remember the enthusiasm about the game, right? It's not about the money, it's about the enthusiasm for the game, and you don't have that in your play. So, boy, what does all this have to do with philanthropy, right? So let me get started. I want to assert to you today that our words don't match our behavior. Our words as philanthropists, as grant makers, don't match our behavior. And we have forced grantees into the role, very similar to the lyrics of the song, that the relationship is about show me the money. Grant maker, write me the check. Wasn't that something like that? Oh, I'm just getting started. My mom told me when I was a little boy, she said, when the words don't match the behavior, believe the behavior. Somebody had a mom like mine. When the words don't match the behavior, believe the behavior. So, as I was reading the introductory things Nancy's staff sent to me, very beautiful words at the bottom of the page in smaller print, but I read it. I still got good eyesight. And it said, we want to have a candid conversation here. Right? Something like that. It's no solicitation. I'm not going to ask anybody for money. I'm a community foundation. I'm not doing that today. San Diego's in the room, no solicitation, because San Diego Community Foundation. Because, right, we say we want to have a candid conversation. So let's have that candid conversation, right? And see, I can feel the shoulders getting up already. I haven't got started. I just told you about a movie, Jerry Maguire. Okay? What do we say as our words? We say as a field, if your mission statement, I want you to raise your hands, if your mission statement has words like improve, better, strengthen, come on, put your hands up, change, right? Any of those words, put your hands up. Okay, if your mission or vision statement says protect the status quo, keep things the way they've always been, never absolutely have any future change from the way things are, raise your hand. Raise your hand. I want to see, is there any hand up? So, Emmett Carson did not make you a change agent. Emmett Carson didn't do that. Emmett Carson didn't write it down for you. You wrote it down, or somebody who created your institution wrote down, you're a change agent. That's what you put in your annual report. That's what you tell yourselves all the time. We are committed to doing this thing, not to keep the status quo, but to change the circumstance to make it better. That's what you wrote down. I have never seen a foundation, vision, or mission statement say our mission is to stay still for our community. We are standing in the way of progress, and that's what we're committed to. I've never seen it. Now, if that's your mission statement, you're good. Your words are matching your behavior. Right? But the secret is we claim to be these change agents. We really believe it. And then you look at our community today. You look at our world, massive homelessness in our communities, foreclosures, unemployment, structural dislocation due to technology, enormous environmental issues. You name it. Museums are closing. Parks are closing. Our educational system is just disintegrating. I dare say almost anything your foundation is committed to doing is in trouble today. And we're supposed to be the change agents. I didn't make you a change agent. I wanted you to have the mission statement that said you were status quo people. But you didn't listen. And so now I have to ask the question, when our communities are in trouble, our world is in crisis, how are we living up to those value statements of change agents? Are we playing small ball or are we playing big ball? Are we looking through the world through the easiest things to do? Or are we rising to the challenge? Because when you say you're a change agent, change is tough, change is challenging. Somebody's not going to like it or like you. That's what comes with it. And that's what you signed up for when you wrote it down in your vision and missions. I didn't write it. But when you said, I want to move people from here to there, that said, I'm about making people uncomfortable. And yet, when I look at our field collectively, not anybody in this room, I'm sure you're out there, right? But when I look at the broader field, we are largely irrelevant to the major issues being discussed in our local communities and around our world. Well, somebody said, well, just because you say it don't make it true. I accept that, but let me tell you about the Philanthropic Awareness Initiative. How many of you have heard of that? Well, let's see, San Diego Grantmakers, how many, any other hands? All right, Kathleen Odney, who is phenomenal, go to her breakout session. Bill Strickland's one of my heroes. He knows about, who else in the Philanthropic Awareness Initiative? All right, virtually no one. Let me tell you about the Philanthropic Awareness Initiative. It is a study that was conducted of influential Americans, paid for by the Irvine Foundation, the Hewlett Foundation, the Packard Foundation, a couple other people, some foundations most of us never heard of before, right? Blue chip foundations. And they funded this study of influential folk across America. And what did this study look at? It looked at how are foundations perceived by influential people, not folk like my mother, who still says, well, what do you really do for a living? You know, people who are sort of players and movers and shakers. And these influential people, 62% of them could not name a foundation on their first try. 62% of influential people couldn't name a foundation on their first try. 80% of these folk couldn't name a foundation they thought was impacting something that they cared about. Right? I mean, think about that. All the problems that are going on in the world. And these influential people couldn't come up with one foundation. 80% of them that said, they're doing something on something I care about that's meaningful. And yet we say we're change agents. We're out there. We believe in it. 55% didn't think we were very transparent or accountable. Influential Americans. So in this candid conversation space that San Diego Grantmakers have provided for us today, we have to ask the question, what's the future of our field? If we claim to be these champions for change, and not just Emmett, but this study that's been replicated twice of influential people can't name us, don't think we're active on something they care about, and don't think we're particularly accountable. People's like, I didn't make it that way. I'm just Jerry Maguire trying to write an epiphany about the future of our field that cannot survive if we don't turn that around. Right? If we don't become change agents, if we don't move from thinking about problems in being the most risk averse we can be. Don't want to upset anybody, don't want to rock the boat, don't want a newspaper headline, don't want to be involved in the public meeting. You can get the grant, but don't say you got it from me. That's not what our community needs today. We spend literally billions of dollars as a field. And now when people are desperate for answers about how to make their circumstances better, we don't have anything to offer. We're standing on the sidelines watching it happen. And yet, someplace we wrote down, we're about change. We're about making it better. And so grantees don't look to us for leadership, for partnership, for vision. They look to us to write a check. Right? And we encourage that that's what they look for us to do, is write the check. Because we don't want to be on the commissions. We don't want to engage in advocacy. I want to be real clear about advocacy versus lobbying. Right? I'm going to take just a quick sidebar here, because it's important. Because too many of us, we interchange advocacy and lobbying. And I'm private foundation, can't lobby. You're absolutely right. You cannot lobby unless it is, quote, self-defense. That means it's an issue affecting private foundations. But what you can do, and what is very different, is engage in advocacy. Advocacy, let me reverse it. Lobbying is defined as the following. You have to do two things to be a lobbyist, or to be considered as lobbying. Two, not one thing. How many? Two things. First thing is there has to be a bill that is being considered. A, B, you name it. And you've got to have what's called a call to action, i.e. encourage somebody to vote yes or no or take an action on the bill. If you do those two things, if there's a bill and you have active support, you are lobbying, and if you're a private foundation, don't do that. You get in trouble. But advocacy is everything else. Advocacy is a position saying, you know, it's a crime if this community doesn't keep that park open, because it serves X number of kids and it's the only safe space for those kids to go. Advocacy is saying if kids don't have books, it's a problem. Maybe we need to move to one of these Kindle Fires or something else, and their whole textbooks are downloaded, and we're advocating for that as a good thing for kids in this community. Advocacy is saying we've got to do something about keeping people in their homes during this foreclosure crisis. All of the things I just said, a private foundation can do. No problems, no issues, no problems with the law. You have spent decades learning about the things you care about. And now when it's time to have some direction, we don't do that. Somebody else's job. Now, you haven't heard me say advocacy is about being engaged in social justice. You can be the most conservative, if that's the label you want to put on it, in terms of your ideas and advocate for those. My message here is advocate. My message here is to get involved based on what you know, to use your influence, not just your money, to find people of passion, to think big, to take risk, to maybe actually fail, to have people write editorials about you in the paper that say, I don't agree. Why are they doing this? And your response is, because we are change agents that care about making our community better, and we've spent millions of dollars over decades on this area, and that's why we believe what we believe. That's your job. That's what you've committed to do. And if you're not prepared to do that, there's a younger generation I met with last night. They're ready for you to step aside. They're ready. They want to have the challenging and difficult conversations. They want to engage in the role of influential, structured, thoughtful leadership to make where they live better. And they don't understand how you can stand in front of them and say, we believe in these things, and then sit silent and not be engaged in doing the most you can do, not the least you can do, in making it better. And if you fail, so be it. You failed doing the right thing for the right reasons for a community that needs us to do that. But this is the time to step up, because the tax code is going to get reevaluated. Everything is going to be on the table. And those influential individuals, 62% of whom can't name one of us. The 80% who say, I can name one, but I can't name one impacting something we care about. Or the 55% that say, I don't really think they're very accountable or transparent. If we don't step up to be what we claim we are, then we have no right to expect people to say, they matter in our community. They make a difference for the quality of life in our community. I don't always agree with what they do and how they did it, but I know they care and they're trying and they take risks and they're open and they're willing to fail and they put themselves out there because they believe in what they say they are. And when we believe in what we say we are, good things happen for our communities. We have power. We have influence. We have a responsibility to use that for the benefit of our communities. Thank you very much. Questions, perhaps?
Can you hear me now?
You have to sing to it now.
Yes, you can hear me now? Now? Yeah? Okay, good. I'm going to start out with a question, and then while I'm asking this question, write something down on your cards and have some volunteers who are around posted to bring them over to you. Okay, so Emmett, the term we used for you is provocative, and so we've been challenged here a little bit. So I want to put some meat on the bones of how one does that, how you've done this, how you've been a change agent at Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and particularly how you've seen, because you're super involved in philanthropy locally and across the country, maybe smaller foundations and corporate giving programs actually do what you just talked about doing.
So, Nancy, I think we make it really hard, and it's something really easy. My wife and I collect African art. We've been doing this 20 years. And she's an anthropologist, so she has all these criteria. I'm not. I know what I like. We see it, we argue about it, we decide to buy it, we start it. The things we first started collecting, they're in a box in the garage. We evolved, we learned. And so my argument here is that you all have been doing your grant-making work for decades. What have you been funding? Why have you been funding in that space? What have you learned? You've been saying no to people all the time because you're grant makers. That's part of our job. Most people get a no, right? They get a no. Why have you been saying no? Well, you didn't think those things were effective, and you had some rationale. So what I'm asking here is for you to follow the things that you've already been doing. I don't think sometimes we create a whole new process that's simply not needed. What I'm asking you to do is verbalize that. What I'm asking you to do is say, given the circumstances of your issue and the community in which you work, what are the best choices from your experience that will move it forward? Write that up in a report. Blog about it if you're a CEO. Hold a conference and bring your grantees together and talk about and articulate that work. Right? And once you start and you find that the world didn't come to an end because one person disagreed with you, right? And some other people will agree with you. You learn from that, you continue to move from that, and that's how you move into this space. It's not complicated. So I can talk about the work we're doing on immigration, the work we're doing in closing the achievement gap. I can talk about a number of things, and they'll look, boy, that's really controversial, and that's really problematic, and how we're working on consolidating school districts, all kinds of stuff. But I'm not asking you to start by being a cliff diver. I'm asking you to start by getting in the pool, right? And too many of us simply aren't in the pool. We believe to ourselves we have a whole lot of knowledge, but we're really shy about sharing what we think we know. In our own conference rooms, we've got it all figured out. Oh, X ought to be doing Y, they shouldn't be doing this, that's the wrong direction. You get outside of that room, we can't comment on that. Well, why not? You spent millions funding in that. If you're not a legitimate, credible spokesperson to talk on those issues, from a balanced point of view, you're not a politician running from office, you're not a grantee needing a grant. If you're not positioned to help the community sort through those questions responsibly, who is? And if you are unwilling to do that, why should you continue to exist? Right? Because these are the kinds of questions that are going to be asked when the tax code gets opened up. What have you done for me lately? And it's a disturbing sign where a sitting president who was a community organizer who sat on a foundation board in Chicago is proposing cutting the charitable deductibility. right? That's scary. So I think you start with what you know and where you are, and it's not about how we're fulfilling our vision and our mission. It's how you're fulfilling your institution's vision and mission.
I got questions.
Good.
So you mentioned the tax code. I have a question that follows on that. Both presidential candidates have talked about eliminating the charitable tax deduction. Discuss implications for us and our grantees.
Well, it's horrible. Right? And it's horrible. But, you know, we have to take some ownership of this. Right? I'm about to get in trouble. I haven't gotten in trouble yet. This is the point I get in trouble. As a field and as an industry, we don't see the world through the eyes of the people who see us. We have a very privileged jobs, positions, and roles in our community. What are we doing to make our field better? I'll give you one example. Now, somebody in this room is about to get offended. I don't know who it is, so it wasn't personal. Right? Can we agree? It wasn't personal, right? Yes. Yeah, some of you not even saying that. I think you're talking about me. Okay? So many foundations have no public accountability. They have no website. They have no published grant guidelines. Their post office box, they say, don't call us, we'll call you, because guess what? It's too much work for us to respond to your proposals unsolicited, and we're busy. Now, I know why we do all of that. People's shoulders, you know, okay. I know why we do it. But how does that sound if you've got the cure to cancer? I got the cure and they won't even let me talk to them. I know how to solve my community for housing, for the museum, for environment, for little kids and prenatal, whatever it is. And I can't get anybody on the phone. I can't talk to them. They won't accept an unsolicited proposal because they're too busy. They don't even tell me why they have the structure they do, what the process is, what the grant-making guidelines are. And now they're about to get theirs in the tax code. How do you think, who's going to rise up? Who in the public process is going to rise up when 60% of folks, 62%, can't even name one of us? And those that can say, I can't get, they won't meet with me, they won't listen to me, they won't tell me how they do their process. It just was a place for candid conversation, right? I mean, that's what I read someplace. So those folk looking at us, it doesn't sound good, does it? It's not something we put our heads up and say, yeah, that's us. It's not consistent with the values that people increasingly have of enormous transparency. It's going in the opposite direction. It's ours, we get to decide, we set the rules. If you don't like it, get over it. No, that's how we are. We don't have open guidelines, that's it. We find you. If you're doing really good work, we find you. Well, they don't like that. And so we can't expect them to rally around our sense of, well, that's really important. Don't you get it? No, I don't get it for you. What are you doing about the issues I care about? So we have to own our behavior. We have to own our role in this. And we get to change. And we get to be consistent with who we say we are. Or we say, well, you know, we're going to use our power and influence to keep them from doing anything. But I tell you, a sitting president, community organizer, the Democratic Party is saying it's on the table. The Republican Party, it's on the table. And not a lot of people who are influential saying, I really understand what those people do and why they're valuable. We're in trouble unless we change.
Okay, I'm going to do two at once. They're kind of related.
All right.
What about the speed of the grant-making process? Do grant makers take too long to make decisions, stringing out the organizations we rely on to effect change on the critical issues requiring action now? Whoops. How transparent can funders be? Is it okay to be public about why you said no?
Okay, so some are fast, some are slow. It's amazing to me that people can go get a loan in half an hour on the phone with 5 pieces of data and get a credit. My 22-year-old daughter just got a credit card in half an hour on the phone. And we take 9 months to give somebody some money that we don't even want them to pay back. So as a field. So right? At the same time, my issue here is not about speed. It's about, is it doing game-changing work? So I look at the process, and then I look at the grants, and I read the descriptions, and often, not all the time, often it's fairly mundane. Grant to, put the surfacing on the park, on the playground, so the kids don't fall and hurt themselves on the concrete. My mom always said, well, you fall down once, you won't do it again, right? I'm not against it. Some people say, you don't like the parks thing. It's okay. It's just not a game changer. I never got a splinter in my rear end on the swing set. It's not the game changer. So be the game changer. Then the second question had to do with...
Okay, transparency about why you're saying no.
Thank you. Well, your attorneys are always going to say there's libel. Right? They're always going to say you're defaming somebody's character. But I think there are certainly ways to say to the grantee, if not publicly, we say to the grantee, look, there have been 4 leadership changes in 7 years. We think you're unstable. They know, that's just, we don't put that on our website. We didn't give them the grant because we think they're unstable. But we do have very direct conversations with grantees about why we think they didn't make it and what they need to do to fix it. And we bring the grantees together. It's one of the most interesting things we started to do with great results. We bring them together as a cohort in partnership. And we say, you're not competing with each other now. You're competing, you're our little laboratory. And so if you have a win doing something in the same space, you share it so they can adopt it. If you have a failure, you share it so none of us do it. And you're our way of moving a field forward in an area, not simply individual projects. Right? And now that they actually believe that they're not in competition with each other, the things that they're sharing to make each other better and to make our knowledge better is incredible. They meet quarterly. They structure the meetings now. We've moved to the background because we've said it's about this bigger issue. And when we're about to make a shift in changing the structure, we talk to them and say, based on all of what you've given us, we've learned we need to move more in this direction for success. And because they've been part of those discussions, they get it. Not all of them like it, but they've been part of that discussion and understand why we've arrived there. And then they also help communicate it to people who haven't gotten grants. That it was authentic, it was legitimate, it was credible. But it's a different way of working. I've got to say one more thing on this because it's important to understand. There is a shift in the power dynamic of people in America today that we don't fully understand because we're insulated from it. Example I'll give you is my wife and the doctor. 10 years ago, the doctor would give my wife or my daughter a prescription. My wife would go to the drugstore, fill it, and that was the end of the story. Today, a prescription comes through. The doctor says, here's some websites to go check it out. My wife goes and Googles the work, calls the doctor, says, well, I saw this side effect. I saw this other drug. How come? She is a participant in the relationship. If you go to a college campus today, students in real time are fact-checking the faculty. It's saying, boy, excuse me, Professor, no, last week a new study came out and it's changed now. Right? In real time. So when we talk about democratizing information and knowledge sharing and participation, it's happening in every sphere. And yet, Nancy started out, well, we need new tunes of music. Something like that in your opening remark. This is one of those new tunes we're not adapting well to. Because we like having all the knowledge. Look, we set the rules, we set the deadlines, we set the parameters, we tell you when you're going to get an answer, we tell you what you want to know about it. Hey, works good in my world. But in every other facet that people work in today, that's not how the world works. That's not how they share information. We've got to figure out how to get on that page because that's where it's going. It's not going back. And we don't like being questioned. We don't like having to explain. We don't have processes that are reciprocal that people respond back and forth to. That's a major sea change for us. But the idea that it's happening in every other sphere in which people live, and we're going to say, no, that's not how we do things, just isn't going to be sustainable. And we got to deal with that. I'll be brief, I'm trying.
Okay, so last night you and I talked a little bit that you work with corporate givers, corporate philanthropy. So we have a question along those lines. How do we make a difference in terms of avoiding conflicting with potential conflicts with a company's business ideals, vision, and stockholders? The difference between making a change and what the business is in business to do.
Well, I don't think it's really all that hard, right? We work with 150 corporations. If you go to our website, you can see the descriptions. We do work for them not only in our local community, but nationally and around the world. Today, largely because of our corporations, we're ranked as the 13th largest international grant maker in the United States. I didn't say community foundation grant maker, I said grant maker in the United States. Companies are moving to democratize this, right? It's why the United Way model is not having a lot of success. Companies are now saying, employees, you figure out your giving trends. It's not the CEO going in and saying, I'm part of this, on this board, that's what we're going to support, or my kid had that disease, so that's what we're going to. Doesn't work that way anymore. The employee group decides what they're going to do. The employee group wants to learn and engage in that understanding. They want to help set the parameters. They want to read the materials. They want to be involved in doing the site visits. It's a different kind of relationship. And so we have been very fortunate in working with those individual employees who now often select companies based on their corporate social responsibility activities. So I don't see the disconnect between companies making money and companies understanding our employees and our customers want to see how we are doing good. How we frame that and the degree of risk that we're willing to take, now that's different. Chick-fil-A gives you a good example of why you can have a personal value, and boy, you'll get hammered if there are people who don't like that value. Right? And so companies are not going to take the riskiest, edgiest things because they have consumers that will pull them back from that. We don't have that excuse. Some community foundations use it as an excuse, but certainly private foundations that are endowed, you are the university professor. You have an endowed chair. You have the ability to say and do what you believe is right based on the principles upon which you are founded. Right? No companies, right? People are going to withdraw funds from you. You're not the bank. People are not going to boycott your products. And I don't think grantees will start to say, no, I won't take money from you no matter how big the check is. So you don't have that corporate issue. And if time allowed, I could tell you why community foundations don't have it either, but they don't.
Okay. How do we better communicate our work so influential people pay attention?
Thank you. Well, look, there are a lot of things we can do. The standard reports still matter. And it's not the report that goes to every household. It's the report that goes to the decision makers on the commissions, on the school boards. You can convene those people together for dinners and closed door sessions. You can blog about it. You can email things. I'm only getting used to Twitter, and 140 some characters is not enough for me to fully express an idea. But certainly you can use that vehicle to express directions and thoughts about certain issues. But you have to empower yourself, your boards, and your staffs at all of the little dinners and informal meetings to say, this is what we're about. This is why we're taking this stance. This is why we're advocating, not lobbying, on this particular issue and why it's important for our community. Letting your grantees know that you've taken that position and why you've done that. That you will support them in taking that position. Are all ways, and it's so rare that any of us ever do that. I assure you, you're going to get a front page article. You're going to get an editorial in the paper. And you ought to celebrate that, because somebody already said, see, that's the problem. I'm going to be in the paper. No, that's the good thing, because now I am spreading the message even further. I am creating the community dialogue about what's important and why. I am positioning my institution as a leader, a substantive leader on the content of that work. I ought to embrace that that's good. And when the letter to the editor comes that says, why is that foundation doing that? Who are they? That's a wonderful opportunity to encourage others to respond as to why we ought to do that and further the dialogue. So those aren't reasons to go, oh, gee, those are reasons to say, yeah. Now, you may need to have some different staff, some different consultants, some people to help you in this new world that you're going to enter into, to be thoughtful about how to use tools that you're not used to using, but that's not an excuse not to do it. It's just a reason to go get the best you can hire and do it well.
What do you think about calls to require private foundations to give more than 5% annually?
I honestly don't have a view. I've looked at hundreds of studies. Kathleen and I were involved at the Council on Foundations together on the board. And I don't really think I'm about payout. I am about, we've got to be more proactive, and Kathleen's heard this before. Somebody's about to get mad at me again, but it's what I believe. What ought to be the minimum size to run a foundation? $500? $1,000? I know we got the Moss Adams team. There is no legal small amount, is there, Laura? Right, okay. So I could open up a private foundation with $500. Is that really good for our field? Is that a good thing for us? Does somebody, when they could write a check, they can open up a Fidelity account, they could go to the Community Foundation, United Way, some university. There are a lot of ways to be engaged and not have a private foundation. Is $1,000 the minimum? Is $10,000 the minimum? We ought to, as a field, have a discussion that says philanthropy isn't well served by a foundation that's this big that can never meet anybody's measurement of accountability. There are other ways to go give and be effective and have the joy. But the ego gratification of a $1,000 private foundation is not in the best interest of what our field needs to do. Now, the Association of Small Foundations are going to go ballistic again. I tell you, but email's about to eat up. Carson's at it again. But we're about to have a debate about the tax code. Do we really think as a field of professionals that's a good thing? And shouldn't we say, no, this is the size that you can meet some public expectations of professionalism and accountability that protect who we say we are and want to be? Well, no, every individual, hey, you got $10 and somebody will write it up and you do your 5% distribution on $10 from the 0% savings account you got. Great with us. Philanthropy's wonderful. Well, the people making these decisions are going to look at you and say, they're just not credible. They don't get it. That's too much work, too much effort, no efficiency, no impact. So let's have the tough discussion. Let's ask the question. Let's say what's the future of our field and how to make it better. But we simply can't say, oh, let 1,000 flowers bloom at whatever size you want it to be. That's really okay with us. Because really it doesn't make sense to people on the outside looking in. Right?
Can you talk about the importance of diversifying our boards and the best ways to do this?
Well, I look across this room and I'd say this is not how I viewed San Diego as a demographic. You all are much too young. No. Look, foundations have, I think, a responsibility to say, how do we get good information and understanding from communities we may not be a part of? Right? I understand if you are a family foundation and your family isn't diversified. You're all African American. Right? Don't go get an honorary white person just to make somebody happy. Right? That's not going to meet it. But you have an obligation to try to understand, how do we go interface with communities we don't know? You can do that by having advisory committees. You can do that in the staff you hire. But you have to be intentional about it. You don't know that community. Right? When I was in Minnesota, I didn't know the Ethiopian community and the Somali community and Russian Jews. I didn't have that experience in Chicago where I grew up. And so I had to go to those communities and say, I know zip, nothing. But I have a responsibility as a community foundation to serve you. What can I read? What events should I attend? How do I learn? How do I become minimally conversant? Consistent with your vision and your mission statement. So if your vision and mission statement is about the arts world and you only know one genre of the arts and new genres are being created, the obligation is on you to go figure that out. Right? Understand those communities. Understand what those trends are. Understand how they relate or don't relate to what you say you believe in. And so I think diversity and inclusiveness, you don't get out of it because you say, boy, my family isn't diverse and I'm for it, it's a good value, but nobody's intermarried yet. It's not good enough. You have the obligation to serve the community. There are all kinds of toolkits at the council and the foundation center and other places about how to do it, how small foundations do it, how big ones do it, how community foundations. There's no shortage of material. What is lacking is our will to do so because, hey, we set the rules, we set the parameters, we get to do it our way, and hey, I don't need to be made uncomfortable. It's about us. And we've got to make it about the work.
So talk a bit about the three main areas, giving areas, where you see the biggest need for philanthropic impact in California.
Again, I appreciate the question, but it really goes against the spirit of what I'm trying to convey. So let me say two things and then answer. If you've got the vision and mission statement of your institution, it is telling you what that is. If by chance you've got a blank slate mission statement, It says, we are committed to changing the world, fill in the blank, depending on what the board and staff like to do. This answer is for you, for me. I think California government is broken. It is problematic. I think we as a state, as part of that, it all goes back to Prop 13. Uh-oh, he said it. Prop 13 had a lot of rules in it, not just about housing, but it had rules about where money went, who controlled money. It took away local control. It created a supermajority in the legislature. A lot of things happened in Prop 13 that you can draw a demarcation line about before and after. And when I ask people this question, when I say this, and I had 1,000 business people in California, in Mountain View. We were in San Jose for the meeting. 1,000 business leaders. And I said, how many of you think Proposition 13 will exist the way it does 10 years from now, the way it is today? Only about 10 people raised their hands. I said, what about 5 years from now? Half the room raised their hands. And what I say to you is most people understand it doesn't work for our state. It may have worked in the past. I'm not having that debate. I wasn't here and I don't know. But virtually everyone says it's not working as it stands today for the benefit of our state. And so if we as a general rule, not everybody, agree that there are elements that don't work for making our state competitive, for education, for housing, for healthcare, all the things, for decision making on every subject we have, somehow we've got to generate a dialogue of how to get from something no one thinks can sustain itself for the future, for our welfare, to a state of we make changes and modify it to get to something that we think will. We don't have a choice. Is it going to be hard? Oh, yeah. Is it going to be difficult? Yeah. People are going to get mad? You better believe it. But it does not make sense that the new companies that are being developed and building campuses pay triple and 4 times the property tax because they're new than the people who started a company 15 years ago. I'm an economist. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense that the new people with the energy and the ideas that you want to recruit to build stuff have to bring their families and pay the highest tax, although they don't use more services. It's a good deal for those of us who are here. Oh, we like it. Oh, it works good for me. But it doesn't work good for the future of our community and our state. And so for me, that one thing is the center that all the other things I could talk about pale in comparison. And most people, by show of hands, how many people think in this room Prop 13 is going to be just like it is 10 years from now? Okay? About 4 or 5 hands. How many people think 5 years from now Prop 13 will still be just like it is today? A couple of more hands. So most of us don't think it's sustainable. So why not start the conversation today that simply says, this isn't working well for us. The supermajority doesn't work well for us. Taking the money from local control isn't working well for us. Right? The way we do the housing piece and treating campuses, corporate campuses don't move locations, so they don't get reassessed. It doesn't make sense in retrospect. How do we start the dialogue to get from a place most don't believe is sustainable to a place we think is better? Shouldn't that be the job of these endowed institutions that are change agents to make communities better? Ooh. I think so. And I hope you do too. Thank you.
I guess we'll call that wrap.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.